Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and speak to you for a few minutes. It's my great pleasure. I've never been to a Keen meeting before, and the energy last night was really tremendous. I can tell how much you are energized with each other and actually working together. My topic today is an old topic for me. I've been fascinated with this topic for at least a couple of decades. And that's when basically the world's kind of turned to innovation in a very big way. And it tried to, I should say, at least. But a lot of confusion about what it meant by innovation. And it actually plays into what you're working on, because you're basically working on the entrepreneurial mindset of individuals and how those individuals ultimately will lead to innovative and entrepreneurial and creative activities and creating value. So that's basically what you're about. But in all those cases, or at least the vast majority of those cases, those entrepreneurial mindset people are going to be working in organizations. And the question is, are the organizations ready for them? And that's what I really want to talk about, because ultimately, organizations have cultures, and you want them to have innovative cultures. And the question I pursued with a lot of interest, and I'm still interested in, is what is an innovative culture? And how can you identify one? And how can you make one up if you don't have one? These kinds of questions. Now, one of the reasons why this may seem a little bit odd to you is that people have no idea what innovation is. In fact, most people don't even know what the word means. And even though it's used constantly, over and over again, in 2008, China decided to be an innovative country. So the president of China said, we're not going to be an innovative country, and every ministry of China is going to have innovation in its activities. Well, those ministries had no clue about what innovation is either. So the confusion around this word and what it means has created a lot of difficulties, and it really hasn't been resolved. So I think I really only have two goals for this talk, and it's not very complicated. One is, what is innovation? And it's actually what I'm professing. It's a word, and it's also a culture. They're quite different, and they're used interchangeably, which makes it so much confusion, to say the least. And I want you to be able to distinguish the word from the culture. All right. And then secondly, I want to talk about what determines an innovative culture. So you can start to see, and actually, this is a bit empirical, I admit, and you may have some other ideas, which I hope you do, by the way, because this is going back a long time now. But I have found that the ideas about innovative cultures that were empirically determined earlier seem to be pretty much holding true today. And then, of course, if you know what an innovative culture is and how to identify it, well, what does it mean to you anyway? Why should it be important to you? And why should it be important to the country? And why should it be important to the world? Because when we're talking about innovation, we're not just talking about innovation in our local company or community. We're talking about innovation nationally and internationally, globally, because ultimately the world will depend on that. So now the first thing I want to talk about is the word, just the word. So how does innovation differ from our common words that we worry about all the time? Invention is basically the realization of an idea. That's what an invention is. Science is discovery and understanding. That's what science is. Anything that does that is science. Engineering is about creating solutions serving people in society. Engineers create, scientists discover. These are orthogonal concepts. Innovation is a successful new implementation. Nothing in the word innovation talks about technology, talks about science, nothing in it talks about research, especially, or you might say it talks about all of them. It's a successful new implementation, whatever that may be. And then entrepreneurship, of course, is producing valued goods, which you are very familiar with and work on all the time. It could be economic value, it could be social value, it could be value in the eyes of the person. So those are fairly clear ideas, and those ideas are not fuzzy. Now the inventor and the scientist and the engineer and the innovator and the entrepreneur, those are all self-identified people. Everybody decides what they're going to be called. It has nothing to do with what they do. In fact, many people do all of these 5 things, and they decide what they're going to be called. I'm a scientist, or I'm an engineer, or something like that. So the people are very fuzzy, but the subjects are not fuzzy. They're very clear. So if you look at the essence, basically, the essence, I always like to use the essence of things because that really gets down to the core, the really fundamental, the kernel of the issue. So the essence of invention is idea. The essence of science is discovery. The essence of engineering is creation. The essence of innovation is implementation. And the essence of entrepreneurship is value. And by the way, you look at science and engineering, discovery and creation, you see why they're orthogonal concepts. They're not the same thing at all. You can't use them interchangeably. Somehow that gets lost a lot of times. Okay, so why is this important? Is the world is actually crazy about innovation. Innovation is the answer to every how will we question. How will we have better economic success? Through innovation. How will we have research success for new creations? Through innovation. How will we have a creative society? Through innovation. It's the answer to all these questions. New companies, new products, new opportunities, always through innovation. So innovation is actually everywhere. And if you look at the value chain from discovery to invention to creation to design to manufacture to assembly to sales, innovation is in every stage, or could be at least in every stage. So innovation is kind of ubiquitous in some ways. And the expectations from innovation are extremely high. I mean, it couldn't get higher. Everything is going to depend on innovation. How we're going to feed the planet through innovation, new products, new seeds, new this, new that. It's a little bit scary to me. I think our expectations are probably too high, but nonetheless, that's why it is such an important topic for us. So now in common usage, however, innovation is not a subject to be learned. You don't learn innovation like you learn accounting. Innovation is a much fuzzier topic, and it's a context, a way of thinking, a way of interacting, a way of living, a way of behaving. In fact, innovation, I believe, is a culture devoted to successful new implementations. It's a culture. So you have to think of innovation as a culture, not a subject. You don't learn a culture like you learn accounting or algebra or something like that. Now, there's one really important idea that you probably never thought about, but you'll recognize quickly. It has to do with organizations. Now, the first thing you haven't thought about is how many organizations you already belong to yourself. You have joined. And if you sat down with a piece of paper and you started writing them down, you would be stunned at the number of these organizations. Of course, there's your university, and then there's your department. That's an organization. Then there's your research group as an organization. Well, then your family is an organization. And then your relatives form different organizations that may or may not get along with each other. And therefore, they're different. They have different organizations. So by the time you get through all your clubs and all your associations, your informal and your formal organizations, the number will be very large, very large. That's true for everybody. In fact, people are very readily willing to form an organization. We just do it like that. We don't even think about it. 3 people want to get together for coffee every Friday. That's an organization. Organizations share 2 qualities. Even the most elementary, informal organization to the largest organization of universities, of states, of countries, of groups of countries. These organizational constructs, they all share 2 qualities. One quality is leadership. They all have leadership. The second quality they have is culture. Every organization has a culture. And if you think of all these organizations you're in, think how you behave with your family, think how you behave with your colleagues at the university, think how you behave with your lab group. Your behavior is different in each of those because the culture of each of those organizations is different. Okay, so each of those organizations has a culture which has characteristic attitudes, values, goals, practices. Those are the 4 characteristics of organization, of cultures: attitudes, values, goals, and practices. So, in a way, that's part of that is your entrepreneurial mindset, by the way. That falls into that category of attitudes, values, goals, and practices. So it's going to be part of culture. Now, I did the following thing, long time ago now, as I decided, okay, well, if innovation is a culture and if there's a set of attitudes, values, goals, and practices which characterize this culture, maybe I can extract these characteristics by looking at innovative organizations, a bunch of them, take a bunch of them, and the successful ones, of course, and see what comes out from them. What can I learn from them? So when I did that, I came down with 7 characteristics that every innovative culture has. I got down to 7. Maybe there should be some more, I don't know, but 7 seemed to work okay. And these are the 7. I just want to make a couple of comments about these 7. The first one is innovative organizations have strong leadership that's really committed to innovation. And what do we mean by strong leadership? It's basically a capability and a position to lead. They have the position in the organization to lead, and they have the capability as recognized by the organization to lead. That's very important. They're experienced, they've been there before, they're respected, and they have a record of leadership. As you'll notice in your life as you go forward, that the record has an agonizing way of being true. Interviews are very often false, but the record has an agonizing way of being true. As you get older, you trust the record more and more because it tends to be correct. And so the record is really important for leadership. It's the most important of these 7 characteristics. No leadership, no culture of innovation, end of story. I've not seen an example yet where you can get it otherwise. You have Bill Gates, you have Steve Jobs, and so on. These people just jump out of these innovative organizations. Innovative organizations, the culture of innovation, this is a characteristic, attitudes, values, goals, and practice of cultures of innovation. The second one is they have minimal hierarchy in decision making. That's a characteristic of them. And that means that there's few layers of bureaucracy. It's a kind of flat organization. Hewlett-Packard used to have engineering offices with engineering rooms with no offices in them, so they can have flat organizations. They have a lot of clarity about who decides what will be done and when. It's not fuzzy at all. It's the leadership and the clarity on the who decides what and when. They have the right people, seem to be in the right jobs for them. There's confidence in the leadership, and there's a common understanding of the cost of inaction. Delays are expensive, and there's really a common understanding of that. We want to avoid delays. Third, have a commitment to deliverables. Now this may sound kind of straightforward, since obviously innovation is about implementation, so how could you not be committed to deliverables? It's not so much that you're committed to deliverables, it is what you're not committed to. Innovation is not a study. Innovation is not research. Innovation is not a review. Innovation is not a paper. Innovation is not a proposal. It's not selecting anything. Innovation is about delivering something. That's what innovation is. It's a successful new implementation. You got to deliver something. That's what the innovation is. No deliverable, no innovation. Done. Okay? They value disparate talents and entrepreneurship very much, like what you're talking about, basically. They all value that very highly. It's the disparate talents part that stands out, because they openly and highly value people with disparate and significant talents who really expand the values and vision and creativity of the implementation. You expand the edges of where the implementation could be. That is very, very highly valued. Being different and creative is more valued than being highly talented and just like everybody else. In the latter case, you don't add any dimension to the implementation. In the earlier case, you do. So you find a lot of unusual people in the arts and things like that you would not normally expect to see on some of the things that actually are adding great value. They all have this characteristic. They value ideas of the creative and the unconventional. They kind of look for this. These are committed to conceive ideas, to create solutions and innovations, to challenge conventional thinking, to be different, and not about business as usual, and linking value to need, basically. So this is a characteristic of these cultures of innovation. Number 6, they move quickly, but then they adapt readily. So this is the idea of no delays, basically reducing delays. So for example, they adapt readily because plans evolve or compromises are required. Change is always accelerating. In fact, change is accelerating all the time. So before you get through your process, things have changed. You have to be ready to adapt. You have to understand, again, these risks of delay. You don't want to wait for perfection. You move forward and you adapt. You minimize the inherent risk. You don't fall in love with your idea, because ideas change. You have to be ready for that. They compromise and redesign. Organizations that can't do this tend not to be very innovative or successfully innovative. And they have a willingness to accept failures. This is more true in the United States. In some parts of the world, it's not true at all. In fact, a failure could be the end of your career. But this is a characteristic of innovative cultures, and this is also why some other countries have trouble crossing this bridge, because a failure is really the end of a career to many people. So you have a willingness, you seek to reduce the risk of failure. Failure is not sought, of course, but it's a possible outcome. But failure is not shameful either. You learn from failures. What experiments never failed, what inventors never failed, what Nobel laureates never failed. None. But of course, not all the time, right? But so it's a willingness to accept it, but part of the time. Okay, so once again, if you look at the essence of a culture of innovation, these are the essential characteristics: strong leadership, minimal hierarchy in decision-making, commitment to deliverables, disparate talents and entrepreneurship, ideas, creative, unconventional, move quickly, adapt readily, accept failures. These are these kind of 7 characteristics that I found in these cultures of innovation. Now, what's the value of knowing these characteristics? Well, first of all, they allow you to identify organizational cultures that can likely become innovative. So for example, let's say you're applying for a job somewhere, and you want to join an innovative culture. You have your experience in entrepreneurship, and you're ready to go. You're all jazzed up about this. You want to make a difference. So when you look at the company and they offer you a position or want to offer you a position, you can examine what its characteristics are. Does it have the characteristics to actually be an innovative organization? That's one value for knowing what these 7 are. Another is, if you're in the organization and you're looking for where do you need to improve staffing or strengthen staffing or strengthen the organization, you can look at these characteristics and see if there are any softness in them in the company. So it really guides you about the strengths and weaknesses of the organization itself. And you can actually design organizations before they even exist in terms of the characteristics you want to start with. So they provide a lot of guidance, I think, in what to think about as well. And I happen to believe that understanding cultures of innovation are really fundamental to the future of our nation, in fact, the world for that matter, because basically so much is expected from innovation that you need to get these cultures right. Of course, it's obvious, I think, also, this is having a culture of innovation in your organization doesn't guarantee you're going to be a success. I mean, there are all kinds of factors that can affect success. Whether you have the right ideas or working on the right ideas, whether there's a market for them, whether you have good luck, whether the economic depression, whether the competitors are just better than you are, and so on. So there are all kinds of ways you can not be successful. So it doesn't guarantee success, but it's a necessary condition, I think. Now, okay, let's just assume for the moment that you agree that, okay, we can actually identify characteristics of organizations that would make them innovative. And you might not agree that we have all the right 7. Maybe you say there should be 2 more, maybe one's not necessary or whatever. That's okay, we can tune them up a bit. But nonetheless, it can be done. And we do that by looking empirically at innovative organizations today and what characteristics do they have that have made them innovative? Now the next question, the big question is, how can this be expanded beyond our country, even beyond our nation, beyond into the world, if this is really going to impact the world's innovative success, okay? So I put down here six levels, 6 scales of innovation. Individual person, any of us here, okay? So that's a kind of scale of 1, okay? Then there are organizations that come next. Organizations are informal organizations or formal organizations, as we described earlier. Those are fairly clear. They've been in the United States for a long time. They basically go way back, and that was not too surprising. And then there are communities. So what's a community is basically a collection of organizations, or a collection of organizations and individuals. They form a community. And of course, the first thing you think about are geographic communities, like Silicon Valley, everybody's favorite geographic community. So you have a community like that. But of course, then there are other communities which are quite different, Seattle, Atlanta, so forth, Austin, Texas, and so forth. So you have these other communities, they're all different, as you would expect them to be different. People are not talking about recreating Silicon Valley today like they used to, which was just, bonkers idea. Because as a culture, you can't just recreate a culture here and put the same culture there. It's a misunderstanding, you see, of what innovation is. But these communities are geographic communities. And of course, they're in other countries as well. Skolkovo in Russia tried to create an innovative community. I guess it's still playing out a bit. But there are also communities which are not geographic. They're just common interests. For the Semitech, for example, semiconductor manufacturing organization created by DARPA originally. So it was a government-sponsored, U.S.-based semiconductor group that did common research works together. So it was a community of geographically dispersed but common interest community. Semitech then became a private enterprise. They threw out the government. They brought in other countries. They brought in other companies. Now it's a global semiconductor manufacturing organization with companies in Japan and Korea and other places. So it's a community as well, right? So you can describe your communities in various ways. They're basically collections of organizations in a way that makes sense. Now, what was unclear at the beginning when I started working on this was I could see right away it needed to get to the state level and to the national level and to the world level. And it wasn't clear to me how that was going to work. We had a long history in the United States, going back 100 years from individual and organizations, and even the communities. But the states, with their political restrictions and so forth, how is that going to actually work in this? Can you enforce these characteristics required on government-level organizations? And I think that's still a little bit fuzzy. However, in the last 15 years, 20 years or so, the states have moved quite a ways forward now. Basically, California's got Institutes of Science and Technology, Georgia Research Alliance, Michigan. Almost every state has a state innovative effort going underway. New York is filled with them as well. So the states have taken this up in a big way. And it's very promising, I would say. I'm stunned in a way how effective it's been. They really got the idea. And the federal government as well. We used to just have DARPA was the only federal kind of agency through the Department of Defense. But now it's ARPA-E, it's IARPA, and National Science Foundation has I-Corps, and NIST has programs as well, NIH. So the government has actually tried to move into this. So actually, this picture is actually filling out the way you'd hope it might, because now we have this span from individuals to world, essentially with the players coming into the game as a need to expand innovative organizations globally. So it's quite promising. So you might look at it this way. You have on the upper orange box, you have individuals, and then you have it's connected to organizations, community, state, nation, and world. And each one is connected to everyone because basically all these organizations connect directly to each other. There's no serial process here. It's all, everything's in parallel at the same time. So that's the way it actually works. I'll give you one example of this here. Now this is a picture of, this picture was actually taken in 2009, I must admit. On the right, on your, I guess it's on your right-hand side, is a Chinese fellow named Wang Gong. He is the Minister of Science and Technology of China at this time, 2009. I'm in the middle. I was the president of the University of Maryland at this time. And on my left, or on my right in the picture, is the State Secretary of Business and Economic Development. We're standing in front of a university research park, as it were, at the University of Maryland. And it was basically 10 companies at the time, half of them Chinese companies, that were there to create enterprise. And the state was interested in foreign direct investment, and China was interested in getting a footprint in the United States, and they had a business school associated with it and an engineering school associated with it. And this research park was actually created in April of 2002 by the former Minister of Science and Technology, a man named Xu Guanghua. And Wang Gong just wanted to cut the ribbon, so we did this in 2009. So this was actually created in 2002. And it was China's first research enterprise outside the mainland in Chinese history. So it was a kind of new idea at the time. So it's the first step to this picture here of connecting the world to the organization, the university, to the state of Maryland, where the state of Maryland expects to get benefit from this, as well as the organization, as well as, in this case, China. Maybe that should be another nation, but anyway, that's the picture behind it. So what we have learned about this is basically innovation as a word refers to successful new implementations, and it really differs entirely from science, engineering, invention, entrepreneurship, though the implementations may involve issues of science and engineering and entrepreneurship as well. But it doesn't mean those things directly. In common usage, I would say that it refers to an organizational culture described, in this case, by 7 characteristics that leads to high-value products and processes, basically successful new implementations. So when you talk about innovation, you're talking about culture. And the likelihood, though not the certainty, that the organization design will be innovative is predictable even before it exists. And if not, why not? I think that's an important value by understanding the culture of innovation. And basically, these innovative organizational cultures actually connect in principle across domains of all scales. So there are mutual benefits to be derived from these kind of global expansions. And that's really important today, where the world is going strongly in this direction. So I hope that these thoughts about innovation will resonate well with your thinking about entrepreneurship. And you can see in your own work and in your own career trajectories how this innovative culture is going to play a role in it, because I'm sure it's going to be true. Because you're going to work for somebody, even if you work for yourself, you're going to be working in an organization. So it has to be there, and we need more attention to it. So I thank you very much for your attention and giving me this opportunity to give you a little bit of history and background on innovation, and I look forward to any questions you might have or any thoughts you might have about this topic. Thank you.